In a time and place when you can work from anywhere.
Two ladies in their mid to late 27s have decided to.
And they're calling it workationing.
The ladies are trying to live as intentionally as possible.
But what does that even mean?
Weirdly, it might actually start with a balanced breakfast.
Are they doing it right?
Listen, we're working on it.
This is the Workationing Podcast. Do you have your coffee, Gringa?
I do. Plenty of coffee. I'm all coffeeed up over here.
I like the French press.
It is very good. The coffee here, the coffee situation at the Sky Palace is very good.
So we are in the Sky Palace, which, how would you describe the Sky Palace? Because I feel like it's weird. I know that I talked about it a little bit, I think, in the final countdown episode, but you were not here. You had never been to the Sky Palace.
No, this is my first trip through. I like it very much. So the Sky Palace is a big old house.
Big old house.
A great house, really.
Mm-hmm.
It's got some good bones, as they say on HGTV.
Yes. Yes, it does.
But it's a great big old house, and there's just a variety of just really interesting, fun, intelligent people living here.
And doing cool things.
Doing very cool things.
Everything from podcasting to beekeeping going on at the Sky Palace.
Yeah, we're sharing space with the Neocash podcast, which you should check out.
That's Neocash Radio. Check it out if you're into digital currency. That's all they talk about over there.
Yeah, it's very, very cool.
Bitcoin, Ethereum, Dash, what you want. They got info.
Yeah, so these are all grown-ass people who could be living alone.
It's true. Yeah, any one of these people could be living alone.
But they choose not to, and I can really see the advantages. It's been really cool. And I think we're going to talk about this more on our next episode.
Yes.
Because we really want to, I'm really seeing the advantages of this co-living situation.
I do too. The division of labor really saves a lot of time and headspace.
Yeah, and just a sense of community. We'll get into all that, but it's pretty fantastic, and I'm really enjoying our time here. We're going to be here for a few days while we just get our hair done, pick up Carrie's car, and transition over to the Montreal leg of the trip. But while we are here, breathing all this fresh air of freedom here in Manchester, I think it's got us feeling a little contemplative, a little reflective.
Yes, and we're reflecting on living intentionally.
Yeah, so this has been, we definitely got into this whole workationing thing with the intention of living intentionally.
Right.
That was definitely central to our goals here. But I think that over the last couple of months, we've really gotten to see that in action, and it's been really transformative for both of us, I think.
And we've gotten better at living intentionally. I will say that it has become easier the further we've progressed along this process.
Yeah, I think it started off as sort of a vague desire in myself to have a life that was more along the lines of what I wanted as opposed to just what I sort of felt like I had been given.
And then it continued into a panic attack, putting everything into a 10 by 10 storage facility.
Yeah. And then now that we've been out here for a while, it's really evolved into something that I would really like to incorporate into my lifestyle moving forward, kind of regardless of what that looks like. So we thought we might talk to you guys about that. We spent a lot of time in Medellin talking about that was such a crazy place.
It was.
And so we talked a lot about what happened to us, but I think we want to talk a little bit more about what's been going on with us kind of internally, because there's been a lot of that going on too.
Right. We've really had a transformation.
We have. Girl.
We're going to get into that, right? We've got some transformational talk coming up at the bottom half of this podcast, but I think that we should talk about what intentional living really means. And obviously we're not necessarily experts in this. I think we're becoming experts as we live more intentionally.
Yeah, our goal is definitely to become experts.
It is. And there seems to be a lot of overlap with the minimalist lifestyle and living intentionally.
Yeah, which I don't think I would have seen coming originally, but I'm totally seeing it now, how those two things are related. In a way, you really have to strip everything away to start really processing what is it that you want to be a part of your life full time, and what are you choosing versus what have you just always had and been used to.
Right. So I popped a quick Google search on living intentionally and found becomingminimalist.com. And Joshua Becker there has written several books on intentional living. And he wrote a blog post called The Helpful Guide to Living an Intentional Life. And there's 3 parts to this foundation. And obviously this blog post has a lot more words in it than I'm going to say. But the bones of it are this. The foundation is to, number one, realize that your life is made up of choices, specifically choices that you make. So
I think that's so important because I think that when you're just living your life in the day to day, it's really hard to recognize how many choices, because you could just get into habits and they stop feeling like choices. It just feels kind of inevitable, like what you eat every day, where you go every day, who you talk to every day,
where you live, what kind of relationships you have with the people who are in your life, the people who are in your life in general.
Yeah. And so it inertia kind of kicks in. And so because it's not an active choice, it stops feeling like a choice. And it's been really important for me to remind myself that literally everything I do is a choice.
Yes. You don't just end up somewhere. You are somewhere because of the series of decisions and choices that you made along the way.
Yeah. Even if you're just sitting in something and stagnating, that in and of itself is a choice.
So that's the first layer of the foundation, is to realize that your life is made up of choices. The second is to evaluate the culture that you're swimming in.
Yeah, that's been a big one. And in some ways, I think you really need to get out of that culture to even be able to evaluate it. It's one of those things that I don't know if you can necessarily see it when you're in it.
It helps to have an outside perspective and to get outside of the community and culture, and then you can take an objective look at it. It's difficult to have an objective viewpoint on the culture that you're surrounding yourself by when you're in that culture, I would say.
Absolutely.
And then finally, you need to examine yourself.
Ooh.
Nobody wants to do that. We've been doing a lot of that.
That's the tough one.
It's a real bitch sometimes,
it's
isn't
a
it?
real kick in the dick.
Nobody likes it. Kelly and I are rocking back and
Literally
forth.
just rocking back and forth like, no.
I don't want to look in that mirror.
It's brutal, man. But it's great also.
And it's a critical part of taking yourself to the next level, is recognizing what level you're actually at right now.
Yes. And it's hard to look at yourself. So it's really easy to, I think, cut corners on that work. And so I really feel like taking yourself out of your regular environment and not having all your regular coping mechanisms and go-tos and sort of escape hatches makes it a lot easier to do that work, mostly just because it's harder to get away from it.
So Joshua Becker continues. So once the foundation has been set, then you need to add the practical steps. And those practical steps are decide to live your life. Life doesn't happen to you. You live it.
Right.
Ideally. I mean, I'm trying to live my life and not let life be a series of events that just kind of happen to me that I have no control over.
Totally. Because once it's like the first step, once you realize that everything is a choice, then suddenly when you push yourself to a place where you're actively making choices instead of just kind of going with the flow, that I feel like that's when your life really starts.
The second practical step is to define a purpose. Identify what you want your life to communicate and contribute. Find a passion and live for it.
Yeah, and ideally something that's bigger than yourself. I know for me, I think I'm still formulating exactly what that is. But it's definitely been important for me to start asking those questions. It's been really valuable for me. And honestly, I think a lot of what I'm realizing I'm passionate about is actually this kind of work. I hope that in figuring out how to live my life more intentionally and to find my own happiness, that along the way, I get a lot better at helping other people find theirs.
Right. And helping other people to get out of situations that they're either stagnant in or are unhealthy for them. I have personally gotten myself out of a few of these situations. I have watched as friends and family members haven't been able to. And, it's a struggle for other people to watch.
Yeah.
People that they care about not be happy and to be stagnant and to, be in unhealthy relationships or unhealthy places, whatever that means. I think it's different for everyone.
Right.
Based on their individual situations. But I personally would love for part of my life's work to be to help people escape out of shitty situations if they can.
Yeah, I think that we definitely are on the same page with that. But I think in this case, a lot of the work that we're doing now is it's one of those, like, you have to put your own oxygen mask on before you help someone else. Doing
that. I'm still in the process of examining myself before I can critically start examining other people and be like, you can make that nicer, Gringa.
Yeah. Trying to make our... I gotta start with the Gringa in the mirror.
It's true. I'm looking at the... I won't take it to Michael Jackson territory. The other practical steps. You need to set goals. Ideally, write them down.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I don't know why I wasn't using this more in my day-to-day life, because I know that's something that we do with our work so much. We're always talking about when it comes to our client work with KPIs.
Right. Key performance indicators.
Yeah. And if you're not setting goals and they need to be timely.
Right.
They need to have a deadline.
Yep.
They need to be specific.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you need to know how much you want it to grow.
Yep.
Because if you don't do that, it's impossible to check in later and see if you're on track.
Right. What milestones are you setting along the way to know if you are on track for hitting your goals?
Yeah. What does success look like?
Exactly.
And if you're not defining that, first of all, how do you move towards it? And second of all, how do you figure out if you've gotten there?
That was a big benefit to writing out our bucket list, I think.
Yeah.
How many people actually write out their bucket list? I talk about my bucket list all the time. I've never written it out before.
Yeah. And ever since we wrote it, I think it's continued to evolve too. I think they probably will continue to evolve. But yeah, I think it definitely helps you move towards the things that you actually want to first define what those things are.
Right. And I guess that kind of ties into the next practical step that Joshua Becker has outlined here, which is to stay focused. Setting those goals, determining the milestones along the way to the goals, they all help you stay focused.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another part of at least our workationing adventure that's helped us stay focused is that at no point along this road have I been in my comfort zone.
Right.
We stay uncomfortable.
Yeah. It's not real cozy around here.
Right. But I think that really helps you to stay focused
right.
on what's going on and stay in the moment. And so it's not comfortable, but there's also something kind of pleasant about that discomfort.
Well, and the last practical step is to learn from others, which is my favorite thing to do. I love it when somebody else makes a mistake that I can learn from. So I can be like, ooh, not going to do, I see what you did there. I will not be doing that.
Right. And also I think, you know, being more open to points of view from other people that you might not have been as receptive to in the past.
Right.
You know, it's our secret 5th rule of workationing is don't be afraid to change your mind and don't see it as a personal failure if you do.
Right.
And I know that during this adventure, I have had just a radical realignment of my values kind of across the board, and that's still sort of sorting itself out. But a lot of that has come from conversations that I don't know that I would have really allowed myself to have before, and opening my mind to perspectives that I either was resistant to or just hadn't even encountered before.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a lot to learn from other people. You have to just open yourself up to that.
Well, and ask yourself, why are you resistant to these ideas? Why are you so threatened by these ideas?
Right.
Or so threatened by these conversations? Because unless somebody's trying to actively push something on you, what is there to resist from hearing that perspective?
Yeah, if your beliefs can't stand up to that kind of scrutiny or to that kind of pushback, then why do you really believe that in the first place?
You probably shouldn't, or you should at least consider reevaluating your beliefs.
Yeah, so I think being more open-minded and learning from others has been a huge part of this.
So that's kind of the crash course in living intentionally via Joshua Becker over at becomingminimalist.com. But in talking about this and in prepping for this podcast, we talked about how maybe you can also apply the 5 W's of journalism to your life and to living intentionally. And so that is who, what, when, where, and why. And if you want, you can add the and how.
And how.
And how.
And sometimes why.
And again, why.
Well, that's vowels.
But you can, if you look at living intentionally and you ask yourself questions about who is in your life, do they deserve a place in your life? Are they giving more than they're taking? Are you giving what you need to give to these relationships? What the hell are you doing?
Yeah. Gringa, what is this?
What are you doing? Are you happy with what you're doing? Whatever it is.
Right.
And if not, what changes need to be made? And then, you know, a lot of people say that they want to do lots of things. And I'm like, okay, Gringa, but when?
Right.
When's the right time going to happen? Because in my personal experience, there is never the right time to start a business.
No.
There's never there's never going to be a right time for me to have children, but some people put that off. And, you know, then maybe it's too late, or when time is of the essence, because none of us know how long we've got spinning around this rock.
Right.
And I think it's important for that to be a focus.
Yeah, because inertia really does set in, and it's really easy to say, oh, I'm going to do something later.
Where do you live? Where are you right now? Are you happy there? Did you pick that place, or are you where you are right now because that's where you were raised and where your family was raised, and maybe you're not even close to your family, you just never really got out of your hometown, or maybe you did and you moved somewhere else, but you've been there for 10 years and you're not super happy with it, but God, is it a lot of effort to move somewhere else?
It really is a bitch to put all your shit in a truck.
It's not fun.
No one likes it.
No, But then are you just going to stay there forever? Is that a conscious choice that you're making?
Right. Are you going to stay somewhere for a decade because you don't want to have 3 shitty days of putting your stuff on a truck and unpacking it?
No, not for me. And then why? Why are you doing all of these things?
Right.
There should be a reason. You should be able to point to every important aspect of your life, and there should be a reason why you're doing that. And if you don't have a reason why, then maybe you should reevaluate that behavior, whatever it is, whether it's a job, whether it's, what you do on the weekends.
Yeah, I think for me, it became really important to start looking at my life and asking myself the important questions and saying, hey, is this the life that I want? Is this the life that I choose? Or is this just an accumulation of consequences?
Right.
And I didn't really like the answer to that question. Hence this whole thing.
Well, I actually thought about the where very early on. I grew up in a very small town in Northern California on a farm of all places.
California.
We had chickens and pigs, and I can tell you exactly how heavy a 50-pound sack of feed is to pull out of a trunk.
50 pounds, I would guess.
It's 50 pounds, but it's heavy.
It's dead weight.
It's a heavy 50 pounds, Kringa.
Yeah. No, I hear you.
Oh, God, you wake up and there's a cow licking the inside of its own nostril right outside of your bedroom window.
Jesus, just it's intense.
People are surprised when I tell them about this, but it's because I got the hell out.
Right.
I was counting down the days until I could turn 18 and move away and go to college. And I ended up in Pittsburgh, went to that women's college. That's where we met.
Yeah.
So it was a good choice. I stayed in Pittsburgh for about 10 years, did the whole college thing, did the whole work thing. But in college, I heard of the Free State Project, and this is why I live in New Hampshire. I am a little L libertarian, which means that I don't necessarily vote for Bob Barr or Gary Johnson, but I believe in personal freedom and fiscal responsibility. So I am socially liberal, about as socially liberal as you can get, and fiscally conservative is how that shakes out. In going to this women's college, there were not a lot of other libertarians there.
I would suspect not.
No, so when I popped a Google search on libertarian groups, specifically near Pittsburgh, but then I expanded it just to find out, well, where are my people?
Right.
Do I have a tribe? I'm pretty sure I'm a libertarian, but maybe I'm not if nobody else is.
Right.
I don't want to be the only one. And it turns out I'm not the only one. And so in college in 2003, I did that Google search and I found the Free State Project. Okay, so the Free State Project is a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to moving 20,000 liberty lovers to the state of New Hampshire. And they picked the state of New Hampshire for a variety of reasons. Number one, it fits in line with the fiscal responsibility and the socially liberal, ethos that libertarians share. So there is a 0% state income tax in New Hampshire. There is no sales tax in New Hampshire. There are other reasons to move to New Hampshire. There are 101 reasons if you want to check out freestateproject.org and really kind of dig into that. But the idea is the state is so small that if you can move 20,000 people there, then you can really affect the kind of change that you want to see. And already dozens of Free Staters have been elected to the State House of Representatives over the years. They have enacted laws. Narcan became available because of a Free Stater who was in the state legislature and introduced that bill. All kinds of really cool things have come about because of the Free State Project. And you're seeing that because there is that critical mass. There is that concentration. And so 20,000 people are moving to the state of New Hampshire. I think that there are around 2,500 who have already moved, and new people are moving in every weekend. So for me, I live in New Hampshire for a reason, and it feels really good to have a purpose behind where I live. And I know, Kelly, you're not necessarily in that same boat.
No, I'm not. It's been really cool to see, though. I am not a libertarian, but I really think this is a really interesting project that you guys have going on here. I really like the community that you have here. I think it's really cool to see people coming together around shared common values. I like seeing how interconnected this community is.
Right.
I like seeing how big it is. You know, there's just a lot of people who are invested in each other and in this sense of community, which I think is really, really cool. I mean, I think it's a really cool social experiment, and I've been really glad to get to see it through you, and also to get to know so many people who are involved, because something that I really appreciate about the Free Staters is that these are all people who have been willing to move for their beliefs.
Right.
So these are people who I think in general, the people that I've encountered are people who are living very intentionally and who are making these choices about their lives and are making, in a lot of cases, non-traditional choices about their lives.
Right.
But it's because they've sat down and really done the research and really thought about it and decided what was going to work best for them. And that isn't something that I have encountered a lot where I come from. Like, I come from Northeast Ohio. I actually really love Northeast Ohio. There's a lot of ways in which nowhere else will ever really totally feel like home to me. But at the same time, people tend to stay there. You know, it's just the people who are my friends, I love them to death. I'll love them forever. But like, of the people who are my friends, I've known them for 20 years and they're my friends because we met when we were 14 and we were in the same class. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's a lot more of that kind of a vibe. And as much as I love that, you know, as we've all started to like grow and evolve, I've started to kind of long for things in my life that I wasn't really seeing around me. And so now I'm kind of in that place that you were like asking, where is my tribe?
Right. And for the record, I don't think that it is necessarily a bad thing to stay in the town that you grew up in and never leave, if that's what you actually want. But make that conscious decision that this is what I want and I'm doing it for a reason.
Right. And for me, it would be really hard to make that decision consciously without seeing options.
We love options.
I do love options. And, you know, all through this trip, I've actually made some really kind of, you know, you think that you know what you're going to feel about different places or what you're going to think when you're traveling or how you... And I have to say, I have been really surprised at a lot of the ways that I've ended up viewing my home and the world. It turns out, you know, I never would have thought that traveling the world would make me love America more.
It has, though.
But it really has. That's literally the last thing I thought would come of this is that I think that America just might actually be the best country, at least for me.
Right.
I didn't see that coming. And so you can't assume that you're going to know how you're going to feel.
Well, and I think that a lot of things have been modeled for us. Relationships, for example. Now you're starting to see on TV and in movies all kinds of different types of relationships. 50 years ago, you turn on the TV and the only relationships that you would see walking down the street were male-female couples,
right,
of the same race. Turns out you don't have to live that way.
No, and
there are other types of relationships. People just might not have known that it was okay or that it existed, and it's starting to become more okay now than it was previously, obviously.
Right.
It's safer now for a gay couple to walk down the streets of, you know, Ohio than probably 50, certainly 100 years ago.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a new idea for me just in the last couple of years that you can even structure your relationships differently. I have been engaged a time or two.
Or three, but who's counting?
Who's counting? And I've never quite made it down that aisle. I actually love being in a relationship. I think I'm pretty good at it. It's like my natural resting state, actually. But I think what I've found over the years is that the reason I haven't been willing to kind of go all the way with it is that I don't necessarily love the way traditional relationships are set up. They don't necessarily work for me. And I'm really excited to be suddenly in a point in my life where I'm moving in circles where people are looking at relationships differently and kind of defining from the ground up what relationships should be based on what works for them and what they need out of their interpersonal relationships. But that's not something that I ever saw growing up, so I never really saw it as an option.
No.
And I see how much angst was in my life trying to fit myself into boxes that I thought were the only way. And it turns out there's a million different ways to be, and you get to choose.
There's no box and there is no spoon.
Right.
Franca, there is no spoon.
There is no spoon, Neo.
In the Free State Project, I have never met more polyamorous people. I don't even know if I knew any polyamorous people. I am friends with polyamorous people who are just out this way.
Yeah, the more I seek out the people in the world who share my values, which actually, to be honest, I would say that a lot of the Free State people, I feel like I share a lot of values with them. I'm not a libertarian, but I really have a lot of respect for those people. Mm-hmm. I think I have a lot in common with them. And the more I find people who share my values and are living in a way that feels good to me. The vast majority of those people are polyamorous.
Okay. Well, and I think ethical non-monogamy can have a variety of forms. And God, Reddit teaches me so much. I popped into the polyamory subreddit.
Girl, you and Reddit.
Well, it's like real people, real problems, real solutions.
Right.
Reddit.
Oh, God.
Just like a lot of hate sometimes.
Yeah, just a lot of.
But then there's also the Internet is Beautiful subreddit. And that's just like full of heartwarming stuff.
Yeah.
You can choose your own adventure on Reddit, and I love it. But ethical non-monogamy is certainly one thing to consider when looking at relationships. Like, you don't have to be in this exclusive situation if you don't want to be. Turns out there are people who will participate in that with you, which I find very interesting.
Right. Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. And I think we're actually going to talk about that a little bit more on a future episode.
So I think for me, what it boils down to is that intentional living is really like not forcing yourself to be in these boxes, but realizing that there is no fucking box. And when you think that there is no box, then how do you want to live and just live that way?
Yeah, it all sounds so easy.
But it's kind of not, because then you also get, some societal judgment sometimes. So like the co-housing situation, we'll call it. Where there in the Sky Palace, there's six adults living here right now.
Uh-huh.
2 of them are couples. Oh, 7. 2 of them are couples, and then 3 singles, including me and you.
Right.
I think that if I told my family that I was living in a house with a bunch of other adults, and I'm in my mid to late 27s, 33.
Yeah.
And
right. It's like, is this a commune? Is this a cult, Gringa?
Yes. Ooh, do I need to go save you?
Right. Or are you all just squatting in here? Are y'all on drugs?
Yeah, because it sounds very weird.
Can't pay your bills?
But that's not it at all.
It's not.
That's not it at all. Any of these people could go out and buy their own house if they want to.
Yeah, no, this is just actually, I have found this to be a very peaceful, healthy, positive environment.
There's a professional chef here who cooks us food.
It's fantastic.
Have you turned on the stove once since you've been here?
No, girl.
I learned how to make coffee, but that's it.
Right. It's been great.
Because, but the division of labor, it really saves a lot of time and headspace, like I said. But, I don't want to own a house.
I don't either. I never have, and I realized that a few years ago. I just don't. There's nothing about that appeals to me.
It seems like you're chaining yourself to a plot of land, and I prefer to be more mobile than that.
And what, I'm going to plant some tulips? Not this girl. Mm-mm. Some people really like that. That's not me.
No, not me either. I prefer to be in an easier situation to move around in.
Yeah.
Sustainable living is another way to live intentionally. Those Tesla solar roofs look really cool. Why not get some of those?
Yeah, I think that, as you start seeing more of the world and the way that this really intense consumer culture that we have in the US affects everything kind of globally, it's hard to not start to look at your life and think, okay, how much am I really taking, and how much am I contributing? And finding that balance isn't just ethical, but I think it helps you find a lot more balance in your life too, and just internally.
Well, and when you're so far removed from the supply chain, so for example, you go to the store and you get a package of chicken. You're just going to go and have chicken for dinner, right? But how were those chickens raised? Because if they were produced by, the big chicken factories or farms, then they were not raised very well. And what you're participating in by buying that chicken is probably something that if you thought about it, you would never sign up for and feel good about. But people do it all the time. But it's because they've removed themselves from that supply chain, and they never really took the time to go back and look at what that actually looks like, and what are you voting for with your dollars. Voting with your dollars is a huge part of living intentionally.
Right. Every
Every purchase you make is a vote for one thing over another. And if you don't know where that food comes from, if you don't know, how are the farmers compensated? Do these big factory farm companies come in and strong arm mom and pop shops out of business and then force them to use their farms to help grow these chickens in terrible conditions? Because I've seen enough documentaries, and like I said, I grew up on a farm. I know what that looks like.
Right. And it ain't pretty.
It's really not pretty. And, I grew up on raising our own animals, and certainly I knew that they were treated well. I was treating them well myself.
Mm-hmm.
Can vouch for that. you know? But so I have an up close and personal view of what that looks like. I know what it's like to come home from school and have a pig hanging from a tree.
Right.
You know, I brought friends over that day. It was very embarrassing. but it's better than you know, getting some of the factory farm produced pork. For sure, I know that for a fact. I don't mean to like harp so much on the factory farming in particular, but that is something that we've been talking about a lot. And in other countries, you don't see that as much.
Yeah, you definitely don't. I think another thing is, like we were talking about with intentional communities. I think intentional communities are a huge deal. In terms of living in community, I think that there's something about that we lose in just kind of traditional American culture. I've realized even just being here and being a part of this, there's really cool parties that happen here at the Sky Palace. And, you know, I'm realizing how much being plugged into a community is just kind of, it's good for you spiritually, mentally. But then more than that, when we're talking about living your values and living intentionally, it's a lot easier to live your values when you're living among a community that shares those values.
Yes. And you see that a lot in religion. So you can't go out to Utah and throw a rock without hitting a Mormon.
Right.
You know, and certainly Mormons in Utah, if you look at the history of that, there's a reason why they're all in Utah. There are other communities of religious people, Mennonites, or one of the Amish, you know?
Right.
But if you're not particularly religious, I know that I'm not and you aren't either.
No.
Then where do you get that sense of community without having to join a church? Because like I don't really want to sign up for a church situation.
Right. And also it comes down to, like, let's say sourcing your food in a sustainable, ethical way. If that's something that's really important to you, you know, one way you could do that is that you could go and grow all your own food and all of that. That's a big investment. That's, you know, there's a lot of
ain't nobody got time for that.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity cost to that, right? But if you are in a community of people who also value that, then suddenly there's that division of labor, and it just becomes easier kind of across the board. And you also are getting that accountability. You're getting it built into your life. So I think that moving forward, at some point in my life, I want to travel a lot. But I think at some point in my life, I'm going to settle somewhere. I'm not really sure where that's going to be, but it's becoming increasingly important to me that I find an intentional community to be a part of people who share my values, because I'm really seeing the value of that overall.
And I will say that the Free Staters have some ethical food sources. There are Free Staters who have their own farms. Bardo Farm is one of them, and a lot of Free Staters get their meat from Bardo Farm because they know that the meat is raised ethically. They know that it's butchered properly. There is a community tie there, and there's also an accountability there. That, like with factory farms, if you get sick or if you have some issue with how the factory farm companies are raising your meat, well, you can go and you can write a very angry letter and you can call their customer service department and, chew some lady's ear off. But what is the result of that complaint going to be? In smaller communities, when, let's say somebody has an issue with the way that Bardo Farms is raising their meat, I can guarantee you they're going to address that, or at least tell you why they're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there's accountability there, because they're also part of the community. And I think that accountability with smaller food production places, smaller farms, it's just easier to have, and there's more, it's better.
Another topic that keeps coming out as we talk about living intentionally is minimalism. I'm not sure that minimalism is for everyone. I really would recommend it as at least a good stop along the way of this kind of self-discovery. I know that for us, Kari and I, we've talked about this. We're just traveling with a carry-on and a personal item. And I mean, I got down to that from a 2-bedroom condo.
Right. Yeah. And I put all of my stuff in storage thinking I'm going to keep it because this is all good stuff. I bought it for a reason. I like the stuff that I have, but do I need it? Do I actually want it? Turns out I don't. And now I'm in a situation where I've got all of this beautiful furniture in storage. I'm recognizing that, like, I don't think I ever want to furnish an apartment myself.
No, because then you're locking into that. You're saying this is my place. When you have stuff, you're signing up for a lot with that. You're signing up for, I'm going to have a place to put this stuff. I'm going to take care of this stuff. And that's fine. There's a lot of people for whom having a home and raising a family and that sort of thing, those are all very valid choices. But for me personally, based on the things that I actually wanted in life, all of that stuff was not serving me.
No, and how much of that stuff did you buy just to make yourself feel better in the moment and then you never really looked at again?
No, I literally just turned 30 and I was like, well, I should probably have a real kitchen table because I'm 30. But listen, homegirl doesn't cook, you know? I don't have people over to cook. And if I was eating, it was on the couch. So like, why? And now I need a place to put this table?
Right.
So it's, for me, I know, and I know we've talked about this a lot on this trip, just really getting down to basics with what I have made me realize kind of how little I actually need to be happy. And I think that that's been a really important exercise for both of us.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I grew up pretty poor. And so as I started making more money, it was just like, well, let me just buy more stuff because I could. And because I wanted it at the time, but that stuff really never served me.
Right. And a lot of it's just, it really seems like you're supposed to.
Yeah. How much of what we do is because it seems like you're supposed to?
Yeah. My friends basically are all homeowners, you know, and they were buying couches and tables. It seemed important that you have those, you know, that they be nice because you need to demonstrate something to people. You need to demonstrate, I don't know what. Who was I trying to impress, really?
With your kitchen table, your grown-up kitchen table.
Right, and whoever gave a shit about my kitchen table except for me, and I didn't even give a shit, so why did I have it?
I know exactly what you're talking about. I do. So let's talk about how living intention. Oh, wait, actually, before we do that, there's a really important one here, right under minimalism, that really goes in with living intentionally, and that is self-care.
Right, because a lot of it, at least what I've found with paring my stuff down to just what's essential, you don't realize how much time is taken up by your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that time that is being taken up either by your stuff or even, you know, we can extend it to everything else, to relationships that weren't necessarily serving me, to all sorts of things. That was all time that I wasn't spending on myself.
Mm-hmm.
And self-care is really fucking important.
Yeah, and how many of us, I know this was true for me, how many of us just go through our days and you wake up in the morning and maybe you eat breakfast, maybe you don't, and then you go to work and you work all day, but like, are you standing up? Are you taking any breaks when you're sitting at your desk all day? And then you go home and what are you watching? Probably some TV, you know, read a little bit, maybe have a couple drinks.
Right.
Maybe I kill a bottle of wine.
Every once in a while, a drink has been known to.
Go to sleep, wake up, do it all over again the next day. How much of that was intentional living? And how well did you take care of yourself that day?
No, and you aren't just hurting yourself through that process. You're also robbing other people because if after you kill that bottle of wine and you wake up, you're not feeling so great, and then you don't eat breakfast because you're kind of rushing. Is your work getting your best you that day? Are your friends getting the best version of you?
Is your partner getting the best you?
Yeah. What are they getting? Are they just getting whatever's used up and left over? Or like that's hard to think about. But I mean, it's the reality of the situation.
Right. And self-care was the, I guess, primary focus for me once we started workationing. I really wanted to get back into meditating. I had done it before. I let it go. I don't know why, because I always loved it.
Mm-hmm.
Working out, couldn't tell you what that was in the months of October, November, or December.
No.
Just none of that going on. And I feel better after I work out. Like all of these things I like, I value. It turns out, I mean, I don't really like running, but afterward I feel great.
Right. And for some reason, it's always been really easy for me to abandon myself first and my needs first. It's always, oh, I'm too busy to work out. Oh, I'm too busy
to eat well.
Right.
What kind of crap was I putting in my face? Not the same stuff I was putting in my face in the last several months.
Mm-mm. No, and you can really see the difference, I think.
Well, so I think we now can get into how living intentionally has impacted us. Because since we have made this change as of January 1st, let's talk about what we've been doing.
Yeah, girl. So I think the big one is, first of all, listen, we're doing it. We're traveling the world. We had gone into this thinking that we might tap out. I don't think, even as difficult as the Medellin experience was for us, I don't think either one of us is anywhere near to tapping out.
No, and we checked in with each other a couple times on that, like, because this is rough. This is weird. It could be bad.
Yeah.
And you still in? Yeah, I'm still in, was what
Yeah.
we agreed to. But even getting to this point was not easy. It didn't come out of nowhere that we're on workation. I had to like put all of my stuff, you did too, into a storage facility. We had to like break some stuff.
Yeah.
To put ourselves back together. And that breaking was all intentional. And it was good for me, even though it felt pretty bad at the time. Once we actually got to Puerto Rico, it was, I can't even tell you what a relief it felt like.
Yeah, it's hard to even explain. And what's so funny about it is how scary and just fraught with anxiety that whole process was. And yet I feel so empowered now having done it because I just did it. I proved to myself that I could. And what did I really do? It felt so impossible. It felt like such a big decision. What did I really do besides just kind of buy a plane ticket and get on a plane? And
you were going to have to move anyway at some point.
Right. And you start to realize that these things that seem so big and so impossible are just, they're just other choices that you can make. They're not nearly as difficult or as hard as they seem like they're going to be. And once you start doing that, suddenly you feel empowered in a way that's hard to even really express in words, but it's changing everything about my life.
Well, it's the unknown. What's the saying about the devil you know?
Yeah.
The unknown can be very scary. And I know that I was terrified. I think part of the anxiety that I felt, I won't say part, a big chunk of it was I was really worried that I was going to do all of that stuff. We were going to get to Aguada and I was going to look back and say, oh, fuck, what have I done?
Yeah.
I made a mistake. But even if I'd done that, then I just get on a plane and go back home.
Yeah.
You know, like what are the consequences of if this is a mistake, then what? Can you go back? Of course you can go back. You know,
right.
you just make other decisions that get you back toward where you were.
Well, and that's the thing though, is when I was growing up, my dad would always say, he would always ask me and my brother, what's the strongest force in the universe? And the answer was habit. And I've been thinking about that a lot now because, you know, the thing that felt so hard about that, I think a lot of it is just that you get it built up in your mind that you can't make these big changes. But it really is just as easy as making a decision and doing it. And really kind of shaking loose that old programming in my brain that told me that things, the way things are, they kind of necessarily have to continue being that way. It's been transformative for me to realize that that's just not the case.
Well, you know, I'm looking at you transform right in front of my eyes. Gringa.
Girl.
How much weight have you lost?
I've lost 38 pounds in the first 3 months.
We haven't had a scale. The Sky Palace comes equipped with a scale.
Yes.
Kelly and I stepped on it.
And holy shit, Gringa, 38 pounds. And I have to tell you, listen, I have been working on losing weight. I have cleaned up my diet. I have incorporated just a lot more walking and physical activity into my life as well as working out.
We've been doing some yoga.
Yeah, we sure have. But none of this has felt terribly difficult. Whereas before in my life, it was just the same thing I was talking about before. It felt like something that was really hard to get control of. But I think a lot of that was this sort of illusion I had in my head that I was stuck in some way that I really wasn't stuck.
I'm down 12 pounds.
You look incredible, girl.
You do too. And I think we're just going to keep getting, you know, tighter and toned.
Yeah, and I'm really, really glad. You know, I've got some bad genetics on both sides of my family when it comes to heart disease and that sort of thing. And I was playing with fire, not taking care of myself. And you know what? I'm done making that choice.
We really have stepped up our self-care
Yes.
in a variety of ways. And I am, you know, we got good face cream.
Yeah, girl.
We went to the store and we were like, what kind of face cream do you use? Not the right one for our age, I'll tell you that.
No, I need something a little extra.
I think we can invest in that, you know? And so we did. And I don't know if I'm seeing any of the results yet. I'm sure they're going to come. If not, I'm going to hit it with some Botox.
Yeah, girl.
It'll be real good real soon. Beyond the weight loss, though, I think part of what has helped with the weight loss is abandoning bad habits and relationships, not even just with people, but like with food. I would never just like binge eat a shit ton, really. But I'm good for the mindless eating.
Yeah, I think something that I was super guilty of was I just didn't want to deal with making food, or it was like I would sleep in, or I would, you know, I'd be too busy or something, wouldn't eat breakfast, probably wouldn't eat lunch. And then by the time I just wasn't taking care of myself. And then by the time I was just so like out of my mind hungry, I would just eat kind of whatever garbage was there.
Right.
And that is a really terrible decision.
That's a bad weight loss plan.
It's not good. It's not good. And so I think just waking up and being like, you know what, let's eat some nice healthy protein in the morning, Gringa. Like, let's hydrate. Let's eat regularly. Like, actually, I don't think it was an obsession with food that made me overweight. I think it was actually kind of almost like an aversion to dealing with food. Mm-hmm. And so really taking the time to like think about it and to make it be a part of my life and to put taking care of myself in that way first ahead of everything else has made it a lot easier to lose weight.
Well, the whole process of workationing with bouncing around from place to place is that we are constantly shaking up our environment. So in Puerto Rico, we really got to look at what were our habits.
Right.
Because we've got to create whole new ones anyway. There aren't pizza delivery options here. Or if there are, no habla.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So we've got to walk to that pizza shop if we want the pizza. I hate pizza anyway, but we did have some nachos a couple of times.
Right. Right.
But across the board, having this shakeup of environment has really given me a better perspective on exactly what I was doing when I was just comfortable in a habit loop.
Yeah, I think it reminds you in a way that if you're just sitting in your normal environment, like what you're used to, and you were talking about, like, you know, that inertia, mm-hmm. It's really easy to keep choosing the things you've always chosen, and it doesn't even feel like a choice because it's the path of least resistance and it's easy. But when you're somewhere totally new in a totally different place, and there's a language barrier even, and that sort of thing, suddenly everything becomes a choice. And it's not that it wasn't a choice before, but this just helps me see it better. I'm having to choose everything in a much more active way anyways. And so why not choose the things that are going to serve me as opposed to the things that aren't?
And correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't you happier with the results of those choices?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So for me, it's just been actually changing up my environment. I don't know that I ever could have done this kind of work on myself just staying where I was before. It would have been much more difficult.
So I think we're going to stay on this living intentionally track, not just in terms of how we're living our lives, but I want to continue talking about it on the podcast. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity while we're here in Manchester to kind of tap into the intentional living side of things.
Yeah.
I would love to have an episode about the Sky Palace and what it actually looks like for responsible grown-ass adults to be sharing a space together.
Yeah, because it's really, really cool.
It is. It helps to have a very nice, very large house.
Yeah. But you can do that when you have a bunch of responsible ass grown ass adults.
It does not feel like a sacrifice.
Not at all. Not at all.
I will say that every other roommate situation I've had, like in college, was way worse than this.
Right. Well, it's just different. You're younger. Your priorities are different. And then how are you choosing those roommates? You know, are these people who, you know, share your values? Are these people who are working on the same kinds of things that you're working on?
Did you find them on Craigslist?
Right. Right. And are you here because this is what you could afford? You know, which I think is a lot that kind of limits things when you're younger.
Yeah.
When you get older, you really get to make those choices. Nobody who's here has to be here.
No. And I would also like to have an episode about ethical non-monogamy, because I think that there are all kinds of ways to have relationships. I've been places. I have been places before I even came to New Hampshire, and I have just never seen ethical non-monogamy modeled in front of me in so many different ways.
Right.
And I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I think it's really cool too. And I'm excited to talk about it.
I think we've got a lot of good content coming up.
Yeah, I'm excited about this. This is going to be just a quick little layover for us, but it's also a time for us to kind of decompress and kind of download some of these kind of bigger ideas that we're having, and we're excited to share them with you guys. And thanks for hanging in there with us while we do that.
Yeah, and if you have any experience, or if you'd like to add to this conversation, if we're missing something big, please let us know. Head on over to facebook.com/workationing and drop us a message. We have gotten several messages from people who listen to the podcast, and we know where some of our New Zealand downloads are coming from.
Very exciting.
Hey, yo. And yeah, so stay in touch, and we love hearing from you. We will get right back to you.
Sure will. All right, well, I think we did it, Gringa.
High five. Woo! Let's go drink some tea infusions.
Yes.
This has been another episode of the Workationing podcast.
If you like what you heard here, make sure to like, rate, subscribe, and leave us a review on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, or wherever else on the internet you're hearing this.
You can also go to workationing.com. That's workationing.com.
Check.
Stay strong. I don't know.
Was that what you were about to text to someone? You just have a mouse malfunction.
I'm good for the stay strong on the breakup.
Oh.
See what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't go back to that. You don't want it. Go you.
Oh, yeah, no.
Right? You stay strong on that.
Strong.
Stay strong. Stay strong, brother. Don't go back.
Yeah, no. And while you're at it, ditch the one with the collar.